Hey guys, let's talk about Japan again today because many of you have asked some questions when I released my last video about Japan, about the 7.1 earthquake and then about the alert that they have issued for a megaquake. So they released a megaquake alert / advisory, whatever you want to call it, and that was the first time ever that anybody did that, and also the first time ever that Japan has ever done that. So what we want to cover in this video, what does that mean and why are they doing it? We scratched the surface of that a little bit in my last video, but I want to give you a quick overview because that is very interesting and that is something you should really know. And for me, the big one, the big one, by the way, does not come from the Cascadia subduction zone on the west coast of Canada and the US. Actually, that comes from Japan, and that comes from the area that we're going to talk about. So I just wanted to know, why have they issued this alert and why specifically now and what is happening there? So we know that there was a magnitude 7.1 earthquake, and because of that, they're saying this has increased the risk of an even larger earthquakes on the zone, the fault line that is called the Nankai Trough, that is an underwater subduction zone that is capable of producing the big one. The same zone that we have here in the Pacific Northwest, the Pacific Northwest Ring of Fire. Japan is also located on the Ring of Fire, so earthquakes and volcanoes. But on the west coast, I mean, this hits home for me to talk about the big one because basically the chair that I'm sitting in right now is on top of a subduction zone that could produce a big one. They're talking about 9.1 at the Cascadia subduction zone, and the same thing in Japan, but there is one difference. The Cascadia earthquake happens roughly every 3 to 450 years. So the last one was roughly like 375 years ago at the Cascadia subduction zone. So they're expecting something definitely within the next 100 years, but in Japan, they expect something within the next 30 years. That is a way shorter time frame. And because that subduction zone roughly produces the big one every 150 years. So the 7.1 magnitude earthquake that just happened in Japan, you'll see it here on the map. Behind me there is the epicenter that's a little bit off the coast there. Basically, it's the southern islands of Japan. That has hit Japan on Thursday. And after that happened, shortly after, the country sent out, or the country's meteorological agency, the Japanese meteorological agency, so they're the ones that are monitoring everything in Japan regarding earthquakes and stuff like this, they sent out an ominous warning. They said another larger earthquake could be coming and that the risk would be especially high over the coming week, over the next 7 days. So that was the first so-called megaquake alert or advisory that they have ever issued. So the Japanese meteorological agency said that the risk of strong shaking plus a tsunami that could happen, that this risk is greater than usual on the Nankai Trough. That is the subduction zone with the potential to produce earthquakes magnitude 8 or 9. And they said residents in the area should prepare. The Prime Minister of Japan has canceled his overseas trips. He came back and he said, or he stayed, and he said, I'm going to stay for at least a week because I'm the most important disaster manager in the country and I should be there. So there you see how serious the Japanese people are taking this, because he could have said, well, we've got disaster management agencies, we've got the Japanese meteorological agency, so they don't need me. But no, he stays there, and that is really something in my opinion. So then there was a lot of backlash all over the world that says, well, technically it's not possible to predict earthquakes. You cannot predict earthquakes, and somewhat you cannot. And so they have basically said today, well, it was not a prediction, but it was a forecast of enhanced risk. You can call that a prediction, I would say, but I know what they mean by this, right? So, but also, this is what officials are also reporting, that they're even able to give a forecast of an enhanced risk. They issued an alert, right? This shows how far seismologists have come in understanding the dynamics of subduction zone earthquakes, especially in this area. So the understanding has gotten better. They know more about this now, and that is good. So here's what we need to know about the current situation. So this Nankai Trough is an underwater subduction zone, like the Cascadia subduction zone. It's also in the Pacific Ocean. The two tectonic plates are meeting at the Nankai Trough. That is the Eurasian plate that is colliding with the Philippine Sea plate, and that is forming this subduction zone, forcing the Philippine Sea plate underneath the Eurasian plate and then into the Earth's mantle. So that's why it is a subduction zone. And these faults, these subduction zone faults, they're building up stress when that happens. And then they can produce these so-called megathrust earthquakes. And these earthquakes basically take place when a locked fault slips and then releases stress immediately. And basically, Megaquake is a shortened version of the name megathrust earthquake. So we know that these subduction zones have produced the most powerful earthquakes that ever happened in Earth's history. So the Nankai Trough fault has several different segments, but let's say, what if the entire margin of the whole fault were to slip at once? Japanese scientists believe that this trough is capable of producing an earthquake of up to magnitude 9.1. So same as the Cascadia fault. That also has various segments that could erupt separately or all together, which would be the worst case scenario. They call it the earthquakes that would rip open the Pacific Northwest. I'll make a video about that very soon. So after that warning happened about a possible megaquake, they already did close down some beaches. For example, you see a picture here of one beach in Nichinan, that's southwestern Japan. That was closed on Friday after that announcement. So they're being careful because these tsunamis could hit after that quake, and then they would hit pretty quickly, usually within like a 15-minute time frame. So let's look into this. What would happen in the case that everything slips at once? A megaquake is happening. A megathrust earthquake is happening. The Philippine Sea plate would lurch perhaps as much as 30 to 100 feet. That's 30 meters, 100 feet, near the country's southeastern coast, because that's where the fault line is. And it would produce very intense shaking. So what would happen is that the seafloor would be displaced in a vertical way, would go up, right? And that displacement would cause a tsunami and push large waves towards the coast of Japan. So those waves could reach nearly 100 feet in height. That's what Japanese scientists have estimated in a publication that they released in 2020. This is not only potentially there is data. We definitely know that the Nankai Trough has produced large earthquakes roughly, as I said, every 100 to 150 years. Back in 2022 already, the Japanese Earthquake Research Committee has said that there is a 70 to 80% chance of a megathrust earthquake in the subsequent 30 years. And why now? Why the panic now? It is related to the 7.1 earthquake that we have just seen. But how? Let's look into this, guys. These large Nankai Trough earthquakes, they tend to come in pairs. Not in a few days, not necessarily. Usually it's the second one ruptures in a time frame of up to 2 years after the first one. So it can happen days after, it can happen 2 years after. So the most recent examples for like twin earthquakes like this in the Nankai Trough was one in 1944 and one in 1946. And why is that so? So this is a phenomenon, they call it. It's because of the segmented nature of this fault. So when one segment slips, it can stress out another one, and then that will slip eventually. So the earthquake that we have seen on Thursday, the 7.1 earthquake, unfortunately took place right on or very close on the subduction zone. And that is also confirmed by the USGS, the United States Geological Survey. Especially one professor that works for the University of Washington and has studied the Nankai Trough for quite a while, his name is Harold Tobin. He said that the magnitude 7.1 earthquake took place in a segment that shakes more frequently than the other segments of the Nankai Trough. So what does that mean? Well, usually regular earthquakes can relieve stress, so that maybe the possibility that this segment itself will produce a big earthquake is less of a concern. So that's good, right? So why do we have an alert for a megaquake out right now? The worry is the earthquake's proximity, the 7.1 earthquake's proximity to a segment that has been building up stress for quite a while, since the 1940s. So it seems that segment is potentially due to do something. It is adjacent to the western Nankai region, and that is clearly a locked up segment. And that's the problem. If these plates are sliding underneath each other, the subduction zone, then they get stuck. They build up stress until it releases the stress and it jumps up vertical. So that's why we are seeing this mega thrust earthquake alert. I won't say prediction, forecast, and that's why scientists are so concerned. And it seems the professor of the University of Washington shares that concern that the Japanese scientists are having. So as we said, they can't predict earthquakes precisely or anything near that. But what scientists are developing more and more is the ability to forecast times of heightened risk. And that is exactly what they have been doing here. And, they have given a very short time frame, which is very unique. Before it was like, 70 to 80% within the next 30 years. That doesn't really help you much if you live in the area, right? But the next 7 days, that might help you if you think, will I go up on the, 80th floor of a high rise? I don't know if they have high rises that are that tall, but maybe you stay in areas that are safer. Maybe you don't drive over bridges. Maybe you don't fall asleep on the beach. Stuff like this. Maybe you become more aware of your escape routes, right? Stuff like this. How are they able to develop this ability of forecast times of heightened risk? Well, this is possible for areas, specifically for areas that have frequent shaking, but also very good monitoring equipment. And both is the case in Japan. They're absolutely leading in that area. So Japanese authorities are asking residents to prepare, to review their evacuation routes, and to pay attention to potential future warnings that might come down the line. So while the risk for a large quake is higher than usual, that doesn't mean that it will or has to happen anytime soon. That is clear to everyone. So the Japanese government has said that their warning guidelines suggest that the chance of a large earthquake that would follow this 7 magnitude earthquake within a week is roughly happening only once per a few hundred times. That is what a study has revealed last year. But there is a chance it could happen, right? So they are saying, well, hopefully the most likely outcome is that the recent shaking won't trigger anything, even though the probability of a large earthquake is higher. So of course, right, they give this alert, but then they calm everyone down at the same time. The professor from the University of Washington says it could be that we might have to wait decades before Nankai has another earthquake. Yeah, or just a week, right? That's the problem with this earthquake alerting forecasting thing, right? It's not precise at all. But what we do know, it is a known danger in Japan, and it has happened. We remember 2011, right? That was a large area of the seafloor. Basically, the area had roughly the size of Connecticut, lurched all at once. And that did produce this magnitude 9.1 earthquake with this devastating tsunami. That was the world's 3rd biggest earthquake that was recorded since the 1900s. So this megathrust earthquake in 2011 caused a tsunami off of Japan's eastern coast, right? And so many lives were lost in the tsunami and in the earthquakes. We all remember the videos and the reporting about when that happened. Really, really, really sad and bad. And of course, Fukushima, the nuclear power plant. And that, from that tsunami and even like the contamination that was arriving, stuff was arriving at the west coast of the US and Canada. So after that happened in 2011, the Japanese government has revised their natural disaster scenarios, and especially now for this area of the Nankai Trough. And so they said that some 323,000 people could die in a worst case scenario earthquakes on the Nankai Trough. The 2011 earthquake caused 18,000 losses. So the Nankai Trough could be way, way, way worse. And 2011 was already unbelievably bad. But the biggest problem would be the tsunami. So they're saying that the tsunami would do the most damage and cause the most losses. So, and while I'm reporting about this, right, it sends me shivers down my spine, and because the Cascadia subduction zone poses similar risks to the west coast. So guys, I hope this was an explanation that helped you a little bit to understand more why the Japanese have issued this alert. And while this all was happening, there was an earthquake that did hit Tokyo. That is not related to the Nankai Trough, but it was a magnitude 5.3 earthquake that did hit Tokyo just a few days after the 7.1. So, and just after they issued the Megaquake advisory. So you can imagine that maybe the people in Tokyo didn't feel so easy about this. So eastern parts of Japan on Friday, magnitude 5.3 in the evening in Tokyo. They're saying that damage to the areas that are closest to the epicenter was not immediately clear, but the government says they haven't received any reports of major damage. The epicenter of this quake was in the Kanagawa prefecture, that is south next to the capital of Tokyo. It happened at a depth of 10 kilometers, that's 6.2 miles. So Kanagawa does not lie within the western zone along the Pacific coast that is known as this Nankai Trough. So that is good. No tsunami alert was issued for the 5.3. Some train lines did stop their operations after it happens in regions near Tokyo and in Tokyo. But also, and that's a good thing, there were no reports that any of the nuclear power plants in the area were damaged. So far, so good. If anything changes, I will keep you updated, guys. I hope you liked this video. If you did, please leave it a like and subscribe if you're new here for more on my channel On the Pulse with Silky, or to my other channel, News with Silky. The link is in the description of this video and of course on my channel page. So check this out there. Lots of interesting stuff. Guys, thanks so much for your support. We just reached the over 1,000 subscribers on the other channel, so that's absolutely awesome. And thanks so much for supporting this channel with your supers and the coffees you keep buying me. It keeps me up late at night, I have to say, up till 9 a.m. just a few days ago when the earthquake hit. So guys, thanks for that. It's late already, so I'll better edit this video and send it out to you guys so that I will see you very, very soon. So thanks, stay safe, be prepared. Bye-bye.